who I am and how I got here. With this being my first video on this platform, I thought now would be a great time for me to share a bit of my story and tell you why I gave my life to the training, equipping, and activating of strong male leaders. Before I even dive into that, I want to say a quick hello to my future self, as well as the millions of people I've pointed to this exact video to say, look at my first one, look at my start, look how amateur it was, and look at where it is now. So if you're one of those people, stop putting it off. That thing you're avoiding, start today, stay consistent, and it will turn into something incredible. On to our story. So the first thing to understand about why I do what I do, why I help men become ungovernable, why I help them take control of their marriages, their families, their lives, their health, their money, their businesses, why I do all of that was not a random decision. This is not some off-the-cuff moment of emotional inspiration where I decided I'm going to go do something really, really hard. I'm going to go build a community of men who are going to change the world. This wasn't some, wake up on the couch one day and had a wild hair at my rear end to go do something like this. That's not the way my decision was reached. And when I say this has been going on under the surface for 40 years, I mean that quite literally. I will be 40 years old tomorrow. And I feel like I've only just now scratched the surface of what God has designed me for and put me on this earth to do. And when I say 40 years, this carries back all the way to where before I was born. My parents named me Gabriel Alexander for a reason. They believe that God gave them those names. Gabriel means messenger of God or man of strength or man of God's strength. And the name Alexander means defender of men. So God, even before I was born, was declaring and deciding and communicating to the world that I have been created for this purpose, this is why I'm here, and this is the mission that I'm meant to serve. If you don't believe in God or prophecy, by the way, this channel is going to be rough for you. You won't be super comfortable here because I talk about God and His principles constantly. It is the absolute foundation of everything I share. You're welcome to stay, but I do talk about that a lot. Anyway, the next huge thing is just, I was raised in this. My draw to strong masculine energy and groups of strong men, it has been in me since I was a kid. I've always been just drawn to brave-hearted men, to the bold, to men who stand up against evil and tyranny and wrong and who want to stand up for truth and want to fight for something good. That has been in me since I was a kid. I was the first of 5 boys. And not only was I one of 5 boys, holy smokes, what a sea of testosterone, but my dad was a very strong man and leader. He was the clear head of our home. He loved football and wrestling and weightlifting and hunting and fishing. He was the spiritual leader of our home. He was the decision maker when it came down to hard things. I saw him as the protector and provider. He was strong and he was manly and he loved God and he loved me and my brothers. So that was the norm I grew up in. All of his friends led their homes and their families and were very clearly men's men. And I loved that. I loved the safety that I felt. I loved the order that it brought to my world and the world of the people I grew up with. I didn't realize at the time how rare that was in the world, but that was my norm. It's what I thought everyone grew up in. As we all kind of grow up seeing other people, we all think that our version of normal is normal for everybody. In addition to my love for just being around strong, tightly knit men, my parents home educated me and with extreme intention. They didn't just educate me, teach me math, sciences, stuff like that. They taught me leadership by intention and by design. Not only did I get to witness their lives, the showing up early, the showing up late, the doing the dirty work, the gathering of teams, the working through extremely difficult relational situations that my parents had to do on a regular basis. I got to witness those things and emulate those things. But they also taught me by intention with my home education invaluable skills that are serving me today. While a lot of kids may have been doing a writing exercise, I was writing an essay to be submitted to an essay contest in a major magazine, or I was doing a public speaking that would be turned into some organization for a speaking contest. My parents didn't give my brothers and I allowances. They gave us a certain amount of money each month that was to be used for all the things they would normally get us, haircuts and groceries and clothing and school supplies. They taught us money management. They wouldn't just pay for everything. They told me I needed to pay for things. And so I went on my first entrepreneurial adventure at 8 years old. we were just raised very differently. We were raised for leadership, and we were raised around strong, tightly knit men. And so with that being my normal, it's what I've always gravitated toward, and it's what the deepest parts of me have longed for, that sense of safety and brotherhood that I grew up in. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons I've gravitated toward men, and also because the reason I've gravitated toward leading men is that is my nature. And speaking of nature, it wasn't just what I grew up in and what I witnessed and what I was trained in. Some of this was, I believe, natural gifting. Since I was a kid, I was a vision caster. I would come up with a grand vision, rally other boys to my cause, create a plan of action, and lead everybody into battle. That was my nature. It was my nature, and what I had learned, and all these things together caused me to take initiative where other people wouldn't, or to be vocal when other people wouldn't, and to take the lead when there was no clear plan of action and there was chaos. And so those things developed skills in me that now serve me today. Those leadership skills or the ability to cast a vision and bring other people. It started with my brothers and bossing them around, but then it turned into motivating and inspiring teammates in youth sports, and then it moved to youth group and church events and ministries, and then it turned into even the businesses that I ended up starting and the music business that I got into. I just always ended up leading other people, casting a vision and leading them forward in something. And so I think those are a massive reason I do what I do today. And growing up, that's not the only thing. Growing up, being the son of a pastor is a very, very interesting experience. One of these days, I'm going to put together a program for pastors' kids just because I haven't been able to find one that I like or one that exists at all. But one day I'm going to do that because I know there's so many pastors' kids who understand what I've been through. But being raised as the kid of a pastor, you get to see things that not many people get to see. What I mean by that is pastors are doctors, but for the soul. People don't go to doctors unless they got a broken bone, an aching tooth, or they're forced to do a checkup. It's the same way for pastors. People don't show up unless they've got some major turmoil going on in their lives, much of which could have been avoided, much of which they were probably warned about. But the bottom line is I got to watch my parents counsel people through some of the most difficult experiences, relational divides, divorces, chapters of their entire lives. Some of these people I got to see over a period of years of counseling. And so I got this very front row perspective of a lot of human pain and the patterns of human behavior that produce certain symptoms. And between the normal I was raised in and what I saw with major dysfunction in lives around me had one major difference between the two. And it was strong male leadership in the home. It was a man standing in his place, knowing his place in the order God had created, and fulfilling his role as the protector, provider, and priest of his household like he was supposed to. Where there was a strong man leading and fulfilling his role and responsibilities, there was peace, there was order, there was structure, there was joy. And where a man was not leading his situation and himself in the way he was supposed to, it created pain and sometimes generationally. And quite honestly, I grew to dislike weak men pretty quickly. Even growing up, I mean, like I said, John Wayne movies and Braveheart and, these masculine movies about male heroes who are going to war or into battle or doing dangerous things. There was always some cowardly, weaselly, whiny, bird-chested bad guy who was wimping out, hiding out in the corner and being a slithering snake. And dichotomy between the two was shown in real life to me as well. So I really developed a distaste for weak men from a very early age. I got strong distaste for men that couldn't keep their wives in check, whose children were out of order, who were prone to gossip and slander, who couldn't say no to your face, who couldn't tell you what was wrong to your face, who would never complain and talk behind your back. I got very, very sick of those kind of men very early on. And I was quite honestly disgusted with weak manhood from childhood. Now, in my own life, I hit 20 years old, literally brand new in my marriage, 20 years old. I thought I knew what I was supposed to do with my life. Growing up the way I'd grown up, I knew what the expectation was. I knew what great men did. I had a fire in my belly for life. I had courage. I had vision. I sincerely believed I knew where my life was headed. And at the age of 20, weeks married, just moving into manhood and adulthood, I went through and started the darkest chapter of my life. Some very unfortunate things happened that I had to walk through. I also made some trajectory shifting decisions. Some of them would end up being good decisions. Some of them were tragic and very deeply harmful to my life and to lives around me. My light got dimmed. All of that hope, all of that fire for life, all of those things that I knew to be true, that vision I had for myself, it was like someone had dumped a bucket of water on my flame. And I lost hope. I lost vision. I forgot who I was. I forgot who I was supposed to be. And because of the deep pain of the wounds that I had, instead of dealing with them and ruling over my emotions, I gave in. And I let those emotions, I let that pain, I let other people and their opinions and words, I let my own weakness rule me. And I gave up. And I developed some very destructive behaviors, thought patterns, and I felt lost. And I felt like I was never, ever going to come out of it. And I completely lost sight of my potential and what I was supposed to be in the world. 10 years later, going into my 30s, things looked pretty decent on the surface, but they were really reaching a boiling point in my life. And things behind the scenes were not good. I'd been married over a decade. I had 2 daughters, owned a beautiful home. I made pretty good money as a business owner. I still owned my first company. I was doing pretty well on the surface. You know, my DNA and upbringing were still very evident. I built a company that was doing well. My kids were well behaved. My wife and I seemed on the surface to be doing well. You know, I had a blossoming music career or career in the music business as an artist manager and touring agent, was signing artists to major labels, doing radio play and touring all over the country, and all the stuff on the surface looked good. All of my training and talent was still showing up in all these areas of life, but I was absolutely miserable underneath the surface. I felt disconnected from God. I had no vision for my life, no sense of purpose. I was very disconnected with my wife. I wasn't being a great father. My kids loved me and I loved them, but I was not being who I needed to be. My businesses were beginning to suffer. Debt was beginning to show up. My life was getting out of order, and I didn't know what to do about it. I just knew that I was unhappy and felt unfulfilled, and I had no sense of purpose for living on earth. I didn't know why I was here and what I was supposed to do. I know I was made for more, but I didn't know how to live it because I didn't know who I was and who I was meant to be. I'd spent over a decade in emotional turmoil. I'd spent over a decade developing ruts of thought, speech, and action. I got comfortable living beneath my destiny, contradicted my conscience, violated my own morals. I really compromised on who I was. And it was a very, very dark period of time for me. I was lonely. I ached for relationships to force me higher, and I couldn't find them. I was frustrated and angry, but I was pretty comfortable living how I was living. Things weren't bad enough to force me to change yet, so I just stayed there. And I tried to change my situation without changing myself. Fast forward a couple of years, and I went through one of the most painful relational experiences I've ever been through. A major betrayal, a significant betrayal in my life, a backstabbing that was unwarranted. And it was the last straw for me. I just about snapped. I was in bed for a number of days, wallowing. Didn't see how to move forward. I'd been taken advantage of in a massive way. I felt lost. I had no idea what to do with myself. And one day I was venting to one of my brothers over the phone about what I had just been through. And during this phone call, he recommended a book to me. I'll never forget the book, but I went and read the book. It was called Boundaries. It's written by, I want to say the author's last name is Townsend. It's a book called Boundaries. It's an amazing book. But I thought this book was going to teach me how to set boundaries up for other people. By the end of the book, I realized that the setting up of boundaries was about setting up boundaries for myself so that I could relate to other people in a better way. And by the end of that book, I realized the problem was solely me, and I was the only solution. No one was coming to save me. No one was going to come and change my life. No one was going to change my stars. No one was going to give me a dream job. No one was going to fix my marriage. No one was going to be a father for me. No one else was going to lift weights for me. No one else was going to lose the fat around my midsection for me. I was the problem. I had caused what was around me. My marriage, children, money, health, relationships, all of the cancerous stuff that I saw going on in my life was just an extension of what was going on inside of me. And in order for my results to change, in order for my situation to change, I had to be the one to change because I was the only consistency in all of it. I could either step on the throne, take back my life, and rule over my God-given territory, or I could live in pain, regret, shame, and fear for the rest of my life. And I had to make a decision. I knew I had to shape myself so that I could shape my future. I didn't know where to start. I didn't have a game plan. I didn't have a roadmap. I just knew that I had to change me. And so I got obsessed with personal development books, books about leadership, books about sales and communication and business building and habit stacking and working through your own emotional trauma and pains of your past and rituals for waking up and going to sleep and working out. And I read everything I could get my hands on. I watched hours and hours and countless hours of YouTube videos. I watched webinars. I went to virtual events. I grabbed a hold of everything I could think to grab onto to help me change my life and my situation and my actions. But the reality was, I was still trying to change my situation by changing myself from the outside in instead of from the inside out. And so even after months and months and months of me dedicating myself to creating discipline in my life and taking all those principles I was taught as a kid and step by step implementing them into my life, without a map, without a compass, just figuring it out as I went, spending thousands and thousands of hours, I was still unhappy. I was getting up earlier and on time. My body was under control. I was fit. I'd started working out every day. I started eating healthy. My marriage started getting better. My kids started getting better. My business started producing better. I increased my company's profits by 300% in 1 month. I still wasn't happy. I still felt empty. I still felt without purpose, useless, aimless. I felt like a warrior without a war to fight. I felt like I was trained, I was equipped, I was armed, and I was sitting on the porch waiting for something to throw myself into because I could spend all the time I wanted fixing myself, fixing my business, fixing my habits, saying affirmations, doing push-ups, but none of it was going to solve the most basic need that I had, and it was a need for meaning. Like I'm actually here for a reason to contribute something worth contributing. I want to change lives. I wanted to do something more than I was doing, and I wasn't. So I hired somebody. Every mentor, or every business guru, every personal development individual, every habit expert, every high-achieving author and speaker I had ever read, listened to, watched, met, talked to, all of them pointed to a mentor or a coach that had helped them become who and what they needed to be. So I gave it a shot. Heard a guy on a podcast one time. I didn't know who to find, so I just liked the guy on the podcast. He was a coach who helped people like me with my problem of excavating my gifts and talents and helping channel that into vision and purpose. And so I called him. International phone call, just called the guy 3 days later, signed a contract, and he was my coach. I had made the largest financial investment of my entire life outside of buying a home, and I had invested it in me developing with someone ahead of me who could help me determine my purpose, help me create a vision, and help me walk it out because I couldn't do it by myself. Now, at the time, it just so happened that this was 2020. My construction company was going through a complete change of business model at the time. I had just experienced my second taste of cancel culture. My music business career completely came to a pause overnight. Didn't know what to do with myself. Didn't have a daily action list to throw myself at. Didn't have an immediate vision. So I'm sitting there with having made the largest financial investment of my life, a huge risk, signed on the dotted line, made my first payment, didn't have a clue what I was supposed to do. I'm all geared up to determine what I'm going to do with my life. And they roll out the Rona. The second I started hearing this stuff on the TV about COVID, I was like, okay, this is nonsense. This is obvious BS. There is no way anybody with any semblance of common sense is actually going to buy this. 3 days after I signed that contract, the entire state of Washington shut down, where I was living at the time. The day I signed the contract, all the schools in the area shut down for 6 weeks. And 3 days after I made this investment, my company was in danger. Now, I had my stuff in order, so it didn't affect me all that much. And I knew I could get through it and weather it. But as a free man, when the state told free men to shut down their source of income, I was seething. I had never been so angry in my entire life. I honestly could not fathom that grown men with something between their legs would actually bend over for the government and be told to stay home, not work, where to go and not go, what time they can leave the house, how many people they can have in their home, how many people can gather in a single place, and what they would put on their face. I was mind blown. This was my waking up moment to what I needed to give myself to for the rest of my life. The fact that it was even a conversation being entertained by grown men, it was earth-shattering to me. It was so counter-paradigm to me. There is absolutely no way. There was no circumstance that anyone would ever tell me to shut down my business, put something on my face, and stay inside. I had never been so ready to fight. I had never been so ready to do whatever needed to be done. And I quite honestly started to fear for my children with what was going on, with people complying in such an easy way, with people just rolling over and letting the government tell them where they can go and what they can do. And then the conversation of potentially having mandated medical procedures started to surface. Those sort of rumors started to go around. And it put me into war mode. That feeling of purposelessness, that feeling of helplessness, that feeling of I don't know what to do with myself. The moment that threat came down was the moment my life changed forever. My mindset completely shifted. I moved into warfare mode instantaneously. I knew who I was. I knew my purpose. I knew what I was supposed to do. It had taken the rolling out of communist orders from the government that was going to affect my paycheck and my family's day-to-day life in order to wake me up to my calling and my place in this world. And I knew at that moment, this is what I'm supposed to give myself to. There are more weak men around me than I can possibly count. I had never felt so lonely in my entire life, looking around and asking, who are the men who are going to refuse this? Who are the men that are going to stand tall? Who are the men who are going to forcefully reject this? And there were none, or very few. I couldn't count on more than two hands all the people I knew, all the men I knew in the city in which I lived that had the nuts to stand on what they believed and to say no. I even saw a great number of men who knew that it was nonsense and still did what they were told, all the way down to letting the government rape them medically. And it filled me with rage and it filled me with fear for the future. Watching these cowards pave the way for medical tyranny and government control of every kind. I knew at that moment who I was, my identity, where I stood in my family, where my line was, what I was going to tolerate, and what I would not comply with. And our line was simple. We don't comply with orders, period. I'm not following your stupid arrows in the grocery store. I'm not putting that diaper on my face. I'm not staying home. I will not limit people from being near me. I will not stay away from my friends. I will not shut down my business, period. That was my line. That was where I stood. That's what my conviction told me was right and true. And I stood on it. And I was ready to go to war, whatever it took. One day I was venting to my coach. This was very early on, very timely, giving him my frustration, sharing my disgust for these men that had been around me, that were doing whatever they were told and complying without any resistance whatsoever. And I remember my coach asked me very simply, he said, Gabe, why do you think this is happening? And I didn't even have to think about it. I knew through and through. Men had tolerated and invited this through complacency, through conflict avoidance, through abdication of responsibility, the handing over of their medical knowledge to doctors and titles, their handing over of the leadership of their family to the priest spiritually or the pastor, the handing over of the marriage to whatever the entertainment is on TV, the abdication of vision and creativity for the future to whatever entertainment is popular at the time, the abdication of financial well-being to the system and government, the handing over of financial security to a job that can terminate them at any point or dangle a paycheck in front of them in exchange for a quick vaccine. Men had tolerated evil in themselves and in their communities. They had not said a word, and now it was public. Now it was out there. Now it was in your face. Now it was coming for your children's freedoms. There's no coincidence that we see riots in the streets, medical mandates, and fake pandemics, extreme sexual perversion, and financial collapse. These all go hand in hand with what men have tolerated and allowed in their lives and in their communities, through and through. This is the fault of men. That was my response. And his next question was the biggest challenge I had ever received and what I needed to hear in that moment. He said, "What is the solution and what are you going to do about it?" And that's the moment I knew what I was supposed to give the rest of my life to. I would connect, unite, envision, train, equip, activate strong men. Those are the type of men I would surround my life with, men I would give myself to, men I would create, men I would forge. If that's the solution to our world, is strong men, strong husbands, strong leaders who know how to provide and protect for their families, who have a heart for God and God's ways, who lead their families spiritually, that is what I'm here to build. That is why I exist. That is my purpose. Now, I didn't want it to be me. When he asked me that question, what is the solution? Well, if the problem is weak men and weak male leadership and the fact that men don't have nuts anymore and men won't stand up for what they believe anymore and men won't lead their families anymore, if that's the problem, then the solution is the opposite. But as far as what I'm going to do about it, I didn't want it to be me. To be quite honest, I knew that's what I was supposed to do for a very long time. It had been a call from deep within me that I had ignored, that I had avoided because of pain, that I had rejected for a long time. But at that moment, I knew, if I don't do this, I don't know who will. If I don't give my life to this, who's going to? If I don't take this on, where are we going to be in a few years? When history tells the tale of now, the chapter of now in time, what will be said of me? What did I do? Did I just watch it happen? Did I usher in slavery by not doing what I knew I was supposed to do? Was I surrendering territory? And I knew it's what I had to give myself to. That moment, my identity became clear. I would help men of God become healthy, fit and physically dangerous, financially free and wealthy, and amazing husbands and fathers and influential leaders. That is what I've chosen to give my life to. It's the reason I exist. It's the reason my upbringing and education were what they were. It's the reason I was named what I was named. It's the reason I was given the parents I was given. God put me here on this earth to help strengthen, teach, train, challenge, connect with, unite with, envision, and encourage bold-hearted men to shape themselves and shape the world. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. Thanks for sticking through my first video, y'all. It's going to be fun to look at in 20 years. If you like this video, like it, subscribe to my channel, share it with a friend. Love to hear from you in the comments. Gabriel Alexander, signing off. See you guys soon.